every city has its secrets, hidden places, forgotten corners, spaces that exist just beyond the edge of awareness, waiting to be discovered by those unlucky enough to stumble upon them. The subway systems of the world are filled with such secrets. Abandoned stations sealed behind concrete walls, tunnels that lead to nowhere, platforms that were built but never opened. These places exist in the darkness beneath our feet, silent and patient, holding on to memories of what they were meant to be. But some stations were never meant to be found. Some platforms were never built by human hands. Some destinations exist on maps that should not be trusted. This is a story about the Metropolitan Transit System of Ashford City, a subway network that spans 47 miles and serves 3 million passengers every day. For most people, the subway is simply a way to get from one place to another, a convenience, a necessity, nothing more. But for those who look closely at the maps, who study the colored lines and tiny station names, there is something wrong, something that does not belong. At the very edge of the red line, past the final official station, there is one more stop. It is not announced. It is not listed on the official transit website. The conductors never mention it. But it is there, printed in small black letters on every map in every station. The end. Most people never notice it. Their eyes slide past it, focusing on the stations they actually need. But some people see it. Some people wonder. And some people make the mistake of trying to find it. This is a story about one of those people. Marcus Webb had ridden the Ashford City subway for 12 years. He knew every line by heart. The red line that ran north to south through the heart of downtown. The blue line that curved east toward the industrial district. The green line that connected the suburbs to the commercial center. He knew which cars were usually empty, which stations had the cleanest restrooms, and which transfers to avoid during rush hour. Marcus was a creature of routine. Every morning at 7:15 a.m. he boarded the red line at Thornton Street Station. He rode 14 stops to Commerce Plaza, where he worked as an accountant for a mid-sized insurance company. Every evening at 6:30 p.m. he made the reverse journey. The same platform, the same car, the same seat by the window. It was a Tuesday in November when Marcus first noticed the station. He was standing on the platform at Thornton Street, waiting for his usual train. The morning was cold, and he clutched a paper cup of coffee to warm his hands. The platform was crowded with the usual commuters, all of them staring at their phones or gazing blankly into space. Marcus looked up at the subway map mounted on the wall. He had seen this map thousands of times. He could draw it from memory. But today, something caught his eye. At the far end of the red line, past Riverside Terminal, the last official station, there was another dot, another name. The End. Marcus frowned. He stepped closer to the map, squinting at the small text. The station was clearly marked, connected to Riverside Terminal by a thin red line. It looked just like any other station on the map, but Marcus had never seen it before. He pulled out his phone and opened the official transit app. He searched for The End. No results. He searched for stations on the red line. The list showed every station from Northgate to Riverside Terminal. Nothing beyond. Maybe it was a printing error. A joke someone had added to the map. Vandalism of some kind. Marcus looked around the platform. There were other maps mounted on the walls. He walked to the nearest one and examined it carefully. The End was there too. Same position. Same small black letters. Same thin red line connecting it to the rest of the system. His train arrived and Marcus boarded automatically, his mind still turning over the mystery. He found his usual seat and sat down, staring out the window as the train pulled away from the station. For the rest of the commute, he thought about the station that should not exist. That evening, Marcus did not go straight home. Instead of exiting at Thornton Street, he stayed on the train. He watched the stations pass one by one, familiar names scrolling by on the digital display above the doors. Commerce Plaza, Midtown, Parkview, Washington Avenue. The train grew emptier at each stop. By the time they reached Riverside Terminal, Marcus was one of only 3 passengers remaining. The others, an elderly man reading a newspaper and a young woman with headphones, exited as soon as the doors opened. Marcus stayed. The platform at Riverside Terminal was quiet. A few maintenance workers in orange vests walked along the tracks. A janitor pushed a mop across the concrete floor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The doors remained open. Marcus waited. A voice crackled over the intercom. Riverside Terminal. Last stop. All passengers must exit the train. Marcus did not move. He looked at the map mounted inside the train car. The end was there, just beyond Riverside Terminal. One more stop. Just one more. The doors began to close. Marcus's heart pounded. He should exit. He should go home. This was foolish. The doors closed with a soft hiss. The train began to move. The train accelerated into the tunnel beyond Riverside Terminal. Marcus gripped the metal pole beside his seat, his knuckles turning white. The lights of the platform disappeared behind him, swallowed by absolute darkness. The tunnel was narrower here, the walls pressing close against the windows. The fluorescent lights inside the train flickered. Marcus looked around the car. He was alone, completely alone. The seats stretched empty in both directions, their faded blue fabric worn thin by decades of use. Advertisements lined the walls above the windows, promoting products and services that seemed strangely dated. A dentist office that closed in 1987. A movie that Marcus had never heard of. A political campaign for a mayor who had died 20 years ago. The train rattled and shook, moving faster than it should. The digital display above the doors had gone dark. The intercom was silent. No announcements, no station names, just the thundering rhythm of wheels on tracks. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. He pressed his face against the glass, trying to see something in the darkness outside. At first, there was nothing, just black void rushing past. Then he saw the lights, small lights, scattered in the darkness like distant stars. They flickered and pulsed, moving in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost alive. Marcus realized with a chill that they were not lights. They were eyes. Hundreds of eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness beyond the tunnel walls, watching the train, watching him. He stumbled backward, nearly falling into a seat. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. This was impossible. This was insane. He needed to get off this train. He needed to go back. But there was no going back. The train had not stopped. The train showed no signs of stopping. Marcus pulled out his phone. No signal. The screen displayed a single bar of battery, fading rapidly. He tried to call 911. Nothing. He tried to text his sister. Failed to send. He tried to open the transit app. The app loaded slowly, buffering for what felt like an eternity. When it finally appeared, The map had changed. All the stations were gone. The colored lines had vanished. The entire map was blank except for 2 points. A dot labeled, "You are here," and a dot labeled, "The end." The distance between them was shrinking. The train began to slow. Marcus felt the deceleration in his stomach, a sickening lurch that made him grab the nearest pole for support. The wheels screeched against the tracks, metal grinding against metal, a sound like screaming. Through the windows, the darkness began to thin. Dim light filtered through, pale and sickly, the color of old bones. Shapes emerged from the void. Pillars, walls, a platform, a station. The train came to a stop with a final shudder. The doors opened. Marcus did not move. He stood frozen in the center of the car, staring at the platform beyond the open doors. His every instinct screamed at him to stay on the train, to wait, to ride back to wherever this nightmare had begun. But the train was not going back. He knew this with absolute certainty, though he could not explain how. The train had made its final journey. It would not move again. If he wanted to survive, he had to get off. Marcus stepped onto the platform. The air was cold, not winter cold, not natural cold. This was the cold of places that had never known warmth, the cold of the deep earth, the cold of the grave. The platform stretched in both directions, disappearing into shadow at each end. The walls were covered in tiles, once white, now stained yellow and brown with age. Some tiles had fallen away, revealing dark spaces behind them, spaces that seemed to breathe. A sign hung from the ceiling, suspended by rusted chains. The letters were faded but readable. "Welcome to the end population. Growing." Marcus swallowed hard. His throat was dry. His hands trembled. He looked back at the train. The doors were still open. The lights inside flickered once, twice, then went dark. The train sat motionless, a dead machine in a dead station. There was no way back. Marcus walked along the platform, searching for an exit. There had to be stairs somewhere, an escalator, an elevator, some way to return to the surface, to the world above, to sanity. The platform seemed to stretch forever. He walked for what felt like miles, but the scenery never changed. The same stained tiles, the same flickering lights, the same oppressive silence. Then he heard the voices. At first, they were faint, whispers at the edge of hearing. He could not make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Desperate, pleading, afraid. The whispers grew louder as he walked. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from the walls, from the floor, from inside his own head. "Help us. Don't leave. Stay with us. Join us." Marcus covered his ears, but the voices only grew louder. They were inside him now, echoing through his skull, drowning out his thoughts. He started to run. His footsteps echoed through the empty station, a frantic rhythm of fear and desperation. The platform stretched endlessly before him, mocking his attempts to escape. The whispers became screams. The screams became laughter. And then he saw them. Figures emerging from the shadows. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They stepped out of the dark spaces between tiles. They rose from the tracks below. They materialized from the air itself. They wore the clothes of different eras, Victorian dresses, business suits, hospital gowns, military uniforms. Some were old, some were young, some were barely recognizable as human anymore, their features stretched and distorted by time and something worse. They all had one thing in common. Their eyes were empty, black voids where eyes should be. holes that led to nowhere, and they were all walking toward Marcus. Marcus ran. He did not look back. He could not look back. The sound of shuffling footsteps behind him was enough. The chorus of whispers that followed him like a wave was enough. The cold breath on the back of his neck was enough. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs screamed for rest. He ran until the platform finally ended, opening into a wider space that might have once been a station lobby. The lobby was vast. Cathedral ceilings arched overhead, covered in murals that had faded to ghostly impressions of their former selves. Marcus could barely make out the images. People waiting on platforms, trains arriving and departing, families reuniting, normal scenes of transit life. But something was wrong with the murals. The longer Marcus looked, the more the images seemed to shift. The waiting people were not waiting. They were screaming. The arriving trains were not stopping. They were crashing. The reuniting families were not embracing. They were consuming each other. Marcus tore his eyes away from the ceiling and focused on finding an exit. The lobby had 3 doorways. Each was marked with a sign. The first sign read, "Arrivals, no exit." The second sign read, "Departures, delayed indefinitely." The third sign read, "Waiting room, all are welcome." Marcus approached the third doorway. It was the only one that seemed passable. The first 2 were blocked by debris, piles of rusted metal and broken concrete that looked like they had been there for decades. He hesitated at the threshold. The waiting room beyond was dark, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Rows of plastic chairs filled the space, arranged in neat lines facing a wall of windows. The windows showed nothing, just blackness. Absolute void. Marcus stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. His breath became visible, small clouds of vapor that dissipated into the frozen air. The whispers that had followed him fell silent, replaced by something worse. Silence. Complete and total silence. Marcus walked between the rows of chairs. Some were empty, some were not. The occupied chairs held figures that sat motionless, their bodies rigid, their faces blank. They stared straight ahead at the windows that showed nothing. They did not blink. They did not breathe. They simply waited. Marcus recognized some of them. A woman in a nurse's uniform, her name tag reading Helen. An elderly man clutching a briefcase, his suit decades out of fashion. A teenager with headphones around his neck, a portable CD player in his lap. A child holding a teddy bear, her eyes fixed on the void beyond the glass. They were passengers, travelers who had made the same mistake Marcus had made, who had ridden the train past the last stop, who had arrived at the end and never left. How long had they been here? Years? Decades? Centuries? Marcus approached the child. She could not have been more than 7 years old. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Blue veins were visible beneath the surface, tracing patterns that seemed too complex for a human body. "Hello?" Marcus whispered. "Can you hear me?" The child did not respond. She continued staring at the windows, her expression frozen in a mask of patient waiting. Marcus reached out to touch her shoulder. The moment his fingers made contact, the child's head snapped toward him. Her eyes were not empty like the others he had seen. They were full of stars, galaxies swirling in miniature, infinite depths contained in 2 small orbs. "You shouldn't have come here," the child said. Her voice was layered, multiple tones speaking in unison. "But now that you're here, You have to wait like the rest of us." "Wait for what?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling. The child smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "For the train to come back." Marcus stumbled away from the child, his heart racing. The other figures in the waiting room remained motionless, but he could feel their awareness now. They knew he was there. They were listening. "I don't understand," Marcus said. "What train?" "The train I came on." The child shook her head slowly. "That train only goes one direction. It brings passengers here, but it never takes them back. We're waiting for the other train, the one that goes beyond the end." "Beyond the end? What's beyond the end?" The child's star-filled eyes flickered. "We don't know. No one knows. The other train has never come, but it will. Someday. We just have to wait." "How long have you been waiting?" The child looked down at her teddy bear, considering the question. "I got on the train with my mother in 1962. She told me we were going to visit my grandmother, but she took the wrong line. She rode past the last stop." Marcus felt sick. 1962. Over 60 years. This child had been waiting in this frozen room for over 60 years. "Where is your mother now?" The child pointed toward the windows. "She stopped waiting. Some people do. They walk through the windows into the void. They think it's better than staying here. Maybe it is. I don't know. I never see them again." Marcus looked at the windows. The blackness beyond seemed to pulse, almost inviting. He could understand the temptation. An eternity of waiting in this frozen room, surrounded by silent passengers, staring at nothing. The void might seem like mercy, but Marcus was not ready to give up. "There has to be another way out," he said. "A door, a tunnel, something." The child laughed. The sound was hollow and sad. "There is one way, but it requires something you might not be willing to give." "What?" The child pointed behind Marcus. He turned and saw a door he had not noticed before. It was set into the wall between two sections of windows, painted the same color as the surrounding surface, almost invisible. A sign hung above the door. "Exit. One soul required." Marcus stared at the sign. His blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" he asked, though he already knew. The child's voice came from directly behind him, closer than before. "Someone has to stay, so someone else can leave. That's the rule of the end. That's the price of departure." Marcus turned around. The child was standing right in front of him, her star-filled eyes boring into his. "I've been waiting for someone to take my place for 63 years, she said. Will you stay so I can finally go home?" Marcus stared at the child, his mind racing. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with impossible weight. Stay here forever so this girl could escape. Trade his freedom for hers. Become another frozen figure in the waiting room, staring at windows that showed nothing. "I can't," Marcus whispered. "I'm sorry. I can't do that." The child's expression did not change. She had heard this answer before, many times, from many passengers who had stumbled into the end. "Everyone says that at first," she said calmly. "But time works differently here. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like days. Days feel like centuries. Eventually, staying becomes unbearable. Eventually, you'll want someone to take your place so badly that you'll do anything." Marcus shook his head. "There has to be another way. The sign says one soul required, but it doesn't say whose soul. Maybe there's another option." The child tilted her head, considering. No one has ever found one. Maybe no one looked hard enough. Marcus turned away from the child and walked toward the exit door. He examined it carefully, looking for any detail he might have missed. The door was simple. No handle, no keyhole, just a flat surface painted institutional gray. He pressed his palm against the door. Nothing happened. He pushed harder. The door did not budge. "It won't open without payment," the child said from behind him. "That's how it works." Marcus examined the sign above the door again. "Exit. One soul required." The words were painted in red, faded but still legible. He noticed something he had missed before, smaller text beneath the main message, barely visible in the dim light. Payment must be willing. Marcus felt a spark of hope. Willing. The payment had to be willing. That meant force would not work. That meant the child could not simply trap him here against his will. There had to be consent. There had to be choice. "What if I refuse?" Marcus asked. "What if I never agree to stay? What happens then?" The child walked toward him slowly, her bare feet making no sound on the concrete floor. "Then you wait, like the rest of us, forever. But you can't force me to take your place." "No, the rules don't allow force, only willing exchange." Marcus nodded slowly. This was something. This was a crack in the system. If the rules required willingness, then perhaps they could be manipulated. Perhaps they could be broken. He looked around the waiting room, studying the frozen passengers in their seats. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, stretching back into the shadows. Each one trapped by the same rules, each one waiting for someone to take their place. "Has anyone ever escaped without leaving someone behind?" Marcus asked. The child was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, hesitant, uncertain. "There is a story, an old story, from before I arrived." "Tell me." The child sat down in one of the plastic chairs, her teddy bear clutched to her chest. She looked smaller now, younger, more like the 7-year-old girl she had been when she arrived in 1962. "When I first came here, there was an old man. He had been waiting longer than anyone else. He said he arrived in 1889 on one of the first trains to ever run through this station." 1889? But the subway system wasn't built until— "Not your subway system," the child interrupted. "The end existed before your city, before your country, before your world, maybe. It just connects to different places at different times. Your subway is only the most recent doorway." Marcus absorbed this information. The implications were staggering. The end was not just a forgotten station on the Ashford City Transit map. It was something older, something that existed outside of normal reality. "What happened to the old man?" Marcus asked. "He told me about someone who escaped, a woman who arrived in the early 1800s. She refused to wait. She refused to accept the rules. She searched every corner of this station, looking for another way out." "Did she find one?" The child nodded slowly. "The old man said she discovered something, a loophole in the rules, a way to satisfy the payment without sacrificing another soul." "What was it?" "She found the station master." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The station master? The one who built the end, the one who created the rules, the one who collects the souls that pay for departure. "Where can I find this station master?" The child pointed toward the darkness at the far end of the waiting room. "There is another door, hidden behind the last row of seats. It leads down to the station master's office, but no one goes there. No one who goes there ever comes back. Except the woman. The old man said she came back. Changed. Different. But she came back. And then she left through the exit door without leaving anyone behind. Marcus stood up, his decision made. Then I need to find the station master. The child looked at him with something that might have been pity, or admiration, or fear. You don't understand what you're dealing with. The station master is not human. The station master is not alive. The station master is something else entirely, something that feeds on waiting, something that grows stronger with every soul that gets trapped here. I don't care, Marcus said. I'm not going to stay here forever, and I'm not going to condemn someone else to take my place. If there's another way, I'll find it. He walked toward the back of the waiting room, weaving between rows of frozen passengers. The child's voice followed him, echoing in the silence. The old man went looking for the station master too. After he told me the story, he never came back. I've been waiting alone ever since. Marcus did not stop. He reached the final row of chairs and found the door the child had described. It was small, barely 5 feet tall, set into the wall at an angle that made it nearly invisible from the front of the room. A sign hung above it. Station Master. By appointment, only Marcus reached for the handle. The door swung open on its own, revealing a staircase that descended into absolute darkness. Marcus descended into the darkness. The staircase spiraled downward for what felt like hours. The air grew colder. The walls grew narrower. The silence grew heavier. At the bottom, he found a door. It opened into an office filled with filing cabinets, thousands of them, each drawer labeled with names and dates, each folder containing a soul. Behind a desk sat the station master. It had no face, no body, just a shape made of shadows and hunger, wearing a conductor's uniform that hung on nothing. You want to leave without paying, it said. Not a question. Yes. Impossible. The rules require a soul. Marcus stepped forward. Then take mine, but not to stay here. Take the part of me that's afraid, the part that hesitates, the part that almost gave up. The station master was silent. A willing sacrifice, Marcus continued, part of a soul, freely given. The shadows shifted, considered, acceptable. Pain tore through Marcus. Something inside him ripped away, something he would never recover. But when he opened his eyes, he was standing on the platform at Riverside Terminal, alive, free. He never rode the subway again.